And greetings. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I'm Steve Deace. Todd Erzin has the next couple of days off, so it's just Aaron and I. I'm actually heading down to Dallas tonight after the show to be a part of the Blaze's coverage of it's not the State of the Union when it's the first year. It's the speech to the joint session of Congress. This one given by newly inaugurated President Donald Trump. He's already building the hype, saying he's going to let it rip tomorrow night. Well, our coverage begins right here on the Blaze, both Blaze TV and on YouTube. Coverage begins at 6:30 Central, 7:30 Eastern, starting at 7:30 Eastern. All right, you don't want to miss it. We're going to have all kinds of us down there, myself included, both before and after the speech. All kinds of coverage right here on the Blaze, beginning at 7:30 Eastern tomorrow night. All right, and also, you want to stay until the end because Glenn's going to have a sneak peek of his new whistleblower special involving NASA. That's supposed to be pretty explosive as well. So you don't want to miss it tomorrow night, starting at 7:30 Eastern here on The Blaze and also on our YouTube, 7:30 Eastern. And then after the speech, we'll have analysis and wrap up as well. All right, coming up on the show today, it'll be your turn to ask me anything. That's coming up in the next hour of the show. Our good friend Bob Vander Plaats returns, and we're going to take a victory lap and say thank you to a good deal of you guys here in the audience because you aided and abetted our home state of Iowa setting history yet again, and history that needs to be emulated across the country and other states as well. And so we'll talk about that coming up here at the bottom of the hour. Also, though, I love to do this. So this part of the show is brought to you by our friends over at Takova's Boots. And I got this note from Jacob telling me about Takova's. And Jacob says, hey, since I've been around your show, you guys have introduced me some great brands. Well, now let me introduce you guys to your new partners at Takova's. I've been wearing them since 2019. Cowboy work boots are typically a go-to of mine because I'm a welder. The lack of laces, the high rise over the calves and shins are ideal for keeping sparks out of your boots, burning your feet. I typically used to get my boots at Tractor Supply or any boot store people, but I just kept running into the problem of non-adequate protection, or the boots wore out too fast. And so Takova's is the brand that I have stood by for the last going on 6 years. The only time I had to replace them was not because of function, it's because I wore them out. All right. But you guys are partnering with great people. It is a great boot. So that's a personal recommendation from Jacob in our audience. All right. And so right now you can get 10% off at tecovas.com/Steve when you sign up for email and text. That's 10% off at TECOVAS at tecovas.com/Steve, tecovas.com/Steve. See site for details. Tecovas, point your toes west, tecovas.com/Steve. All right, let's get it started right now. Here's Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Sparks Fly at the White House.
Have you said thank you once?
A lot of times.
No, in this
even
entire
today.
meeting, you said thank you.
Even today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Yes, President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance's meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky did not go well. It started when the Ukrainian president tried to lecture Vance about his view of history on the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
There are dozens of us. Dozens!
I've never seen Trump as upset in a setting like this before.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
I'm not playing cards.
Right now, you don't.
Yeah,
you're playing cards.
Mr. President.
You're playing cards.
Serious.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III.
Left-wingers immediately created and joined the narrative that Trump and Vance planned the whole time to gang up and bully Zelensky.
We stand with Ukraine. I go, you don't even have custody of your kids, dude.
On Friday night, in total unison and totally unplanned serendipity, various Eurotrash leaders pledged once again their fealty to Ukraine. On Sunday, yet again, totally unplanned and spontaneous, those same European leaders, some of them, gathered in London for an emergency meeting with Zelensky, with the UK pledging $2 billion in support for air defense for Ukraine. British Premier Keir Starmer says he and other European leaders are ready to fill the void left by the United States.
The UK is prepared to back this, with boots on the ground and planes in the air, together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting.
Nevertheless, Zelensky said later on Sunday he's ready to sign the minerals agreement he left on the table at the White House on Friday. Zelensky made the decision after this discussion with his advisors.
Maybe you can just go back.
Go back?
Yeah. Pretend like it never happened.
You mean just walk into the staff meeting on Monday morning like it never happened?
Sure. You're an emotional person. People don't take you seriously.
So how bad was this flare-up with Zelensky? Well, hell froze over, that's how bad.
He was terrible at Munich, Zelensky, and I think he has made it almost impossible to sell to the American people that he's a good investment.
So just to sum up the last 96 hours, Zelensky made a poor choice in crossing the line of disrespect inside the Oval Office. Every left-winger in America spontaneously came to the same conclusion that Trump and Vance had prearranged to gang up on Zelensky. Friday night, European leaders copy and pasted the same messages of support for Zelensky. And once again, in total spontaneity, Sunday there's an emergency meeting of European leaders, once again totally spontaneous, where they come to the same conclusion that they need to be doing more to pull their weight in the defense of their continent, at the very least a proto-fulfillment of Trump's European foreign policy of the last decade. And Zelensky says he wants to sign the minerals deal he ostensibly was in Washington to sign anyways. And Trump looks bad here. How exactly? Moving on, at home, yet another large-scale ICE deportation operation was leaked, this time to a supposed citizen journalist named Pablo Manriquez, who warned the likely violent targets of this raid in Northern Virginia to quote-unquote plan accordingly. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tells NPR she has no plans of slowing down her webinars designed to help illegals evade ICE.
My job is to educate and act as a liaison of critical information to my constituents.
Holman was upset, I suppose, because he felt that you were giving advice to people who were here illegally. Mm-hmm. Were you?
I was giving advice to all of my constituents.
Learning Chinese today. Today's phrase is, a lot of people need to go to prison for a very long time.
许多人需要长期入狱.
Former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is running for mayor of New York City. He says he and that city did a really great job during COVID.
Everyone did their part. Everyone held their position. And we kept this place, this great place running, and we saved lives, and we led the nation.
Amazing. Every word of what you just said was wrong.
Elon Musk joined Joe Rogan once again and says there's a reason the mother lode hasn't dropped on people like Anthony Fauci and other corrupt actors on how they make their fortune.
It's more than just insider trading. Like the insider trading stuff, like the stock portfolio stuff is quite trackable, but there's, it's a lot more than insider trading.
The way they're acquiring wealth.
Correct.
And what other methods?
I mean, this is really going to get me assassinated. It's like I'm not lengthening my lifespan by explaining this stuff, to say the least. I mean, I was supposed to go back to DC. How am I going to survive? This is going to kill me for sure. In fact, I do think like it's like I actually have to be careful that I don't push too hard on the corruption stuff because it's going to get me killed. Yeah. It's like I was actually thinking about that on the plane flight over here. It's like if I push too hard on the corruption stuff, people get desperate.
And that's what happened while we were away.
That clip is incredible. That clip is incredible. We're going to talk more about that clip with Elon Musk today in the overtime. For Blaze TV subscribers, blazetv.com/Deace is where you can go to become a subscriber if you are not yet one. blazetv.com/Deace. That's blazetv.com/Deace. You'll go there and you'll get to see today's overtime and all the exclusive content, including Glenn's upcoming whistleblower special we just previewed a minute ago. All of the exclusive content we do for subscribers available to you if you subscribe today at blazetv.com/Deace and go there and subscribe through my landing page, and you'll get a discount for your subscription at Blaze TV, blazetv.com/Deace. But I want to instead spend, Aaron, the bulk of the time here, since you also spent the bulk of the time in your in your montage, talking about Ukraine. This is the biggest story in the world today, according to Glitch. The war by which we see almost no daily headlights of, even though it's heading towards its third anniversary, correct?
Yeah.
And it's supposedly worth fighting World War III over and everything else. This has already been broken down. Aaron did a good job breaking it down geopolitically just here in his montage. You know, you're watching Donald Trump here with a classic leverage play, right? And this is art of the deal kind of stuff. And you've got J.D. Vance coming off the top rope, I think, speaking for pretty much every 40-hour-a-week, paycheck-to-paycheck American. Could you maybe say thanks once? You know, I roofed this week for Ukraine, all right? You know, I cleaned out people's storm drains and all the junk in there and people's burst pipes. I did it for Ukraine this week. Could maybe we get a thank you, is essentially what J.D. Vance is saying on behalf of working America. So that's all been done. I want to examine this, if we could, from a worldview standpoint, because worldview is destiny, and that's kind of what we do. There's a lot of talk on the right now. And you know, Aaron, you try to keep me abreast of what these terms mean, and I frankly just don't care. Dissident right, woke right, right of right, the new right, all these various terms. And I see people in my feed, friends of mine, claim to be on both sides of this, going back at each other all day long. And I've got a million other things that I'm in this business to make people angry about. And this particular urination match ain't one of them. Okay. But out of this conversation, there's this idea that's being bandied about right now about the so-called post-World War II consensus, or the post-war consensus. All right. This will probably shock none of you if you are longtime listeners to this show. Okay. But I actually think the entire premise of that argument is wrong. Now, you know me also. You didn't turn into Tim Keller tonight. This ain't John Piper tonight. You know, this ain't Christianity rarely, okay? This isn't because, you know, we're seeking out the middle way. That's what we're known for on this show, right, Aaron? The middle way. That's what we do around here, right? No. It's because I just simply don't think the premise is correct. I think that there does need to be a debate about a post-global war consensus, but I think y'all have chosen the wrong one. Because you're watching a replay of the conditions of the post-World War consensus you should be debating is actually what is taking place right now with Ukraine. The real post-war consensus debate that should be occurring, especially on the right, is the post-World War I consensus. You guys have the wrong war. You have the wrong war. Everything that you're complaining about on opposite sides of this, by the way, was all born out of World War I. World War I essentially gave rise to the Western left, to much of what we now understand as modern progressivism was born out of World War I. The reality, what was World War I fought over? I don't know. Do you know? I don't know. This is what the classic book, All Quiet on the Western Front, which has been adapted into several great movies over the years, this is what it's about. I mean, essentially, for hundreds of years in Europe, there was a clan of families known as the Habsburgs, and they were given the term, the Habsburg dynasty. And they married and intermarried and intermarried and intermarried some more. And for centuries in Europe, essentially every war that was fought within that continent was because of one of two things. Protestants and Catholics and members of the Habsburg dynasty having essentially a family squabble over other members of that family tree and who was going to actually get to be the patriarch of that family. You can kind of look at the Habsburg dynasty as kind of the proto-version of the Council on Foreign Relations. This idea that we will be at the end of history and we'll get rid of the rise of tyrannical, expansionist powers if we all just are in bed together and we're all in debt to each other and we all buy each other's goods. That's kind of, that's kind of the premise, unless you believe it's one of the tools that the Antichrist will use to enact global dominion. You might be right about that. But if you take that meta off the table, that's essentially the working theory of these kinds of globalist constructs. The problem is they go completely against human nature. That's just not how human nature works. And egalitarianism sounds great in theory. But in the end, we end up looking from man to pig and pig to man and back to pig again, and we can't tell which is which. In the end, human nature is what it is. It is fallen. We will seek to dominate our fellow man. We have to acknowledge whatever solutions we come to the table with has to acknowledge the reality of the human condition. The problem with the modern Western left or progressivism is it rejects the most basic fact of human nature. Oh, no, not the whole male and female thing. It does that because of what I'm talking about. It refuses to see that people are sinners. Instead, it sees the human species as perfectible and often sees those that are already in the hierarchy of its ranks as already perfected. And they're here to tell us how we can now reach their same stage of perfection under their control and power, of course. Progressivism is always about power and control. Why? Because they take on the attributes of their true father, and all he cares about is power and control too. I will ascend. I will be like the Most High. It was really the post-World War I consensus. The League of Nations, the idea that we had arrived, that within a generation of Horace Mann and Thomas Dewey and the rest of these ilk, we finally had come now. We had our Genesis creation account via Darwin. We now have our ethics from Thomas Malthus and Margaret Sanger. We now are finally the people we've been waiting for. And it's much of this consensus coming up after World War I, which, by the way, then gave rise to two devastating global conflicts. World War II and then the Cold War. Because those things happen. When you deny the natural law, it will end up breaking you. It doesn't change for us. It was here before we got here, and it will be here long after we are gone. The idea of governments removing their currencies from commodities, deficit spending, Keynesian economics, all of this stuff largely comes out of the post-World War I consensus. World War I was literally fought over nothing. And knowing what you know now, we would have been better off if Germany had won and we just stayed out of the war. It was literally just a bunch of rich elites in Europe that were all intermarried and all related. The guys just showed up at the urinal, dropped trow, grabbed rulers, and started measuring. And out of this came weapons of mass destruction, gas warfare, setting the stage for the rest of the century that we would see. You guys are all arguing the wrong post-war consensus. And by recognizing that, by the way, you also stay away from the ditch of making it look like you're Nazi simps. Because you're arguing the wrong war. You're watching World War I play out again right now. Just substitute Habsburgs for World Economic Forum. Essentially, Vladimir Zelensky is just, let me put it this way. Putin is exactly what Zelensky would be if they just traded militaries. These are the same guy. There's no good guy here. There was no good guy in World War I. There was no bad guy in World War I. There were just guys that largely had the exact same cultural premises as the other side. They just wanted dominance over one another. There's not much inherently different between Vladimir Zelensky and Vladimir Putin. One just has a superior military. They're the same guy. Zelensky has behaved very Putin-like to his own people the last few years. Our governments in the West have behaved very Putin-like to us. Didn't we just celebrate 2 weeks ago, Aaron, the Vice President of the United States speaking in Munich, and that was a Freudian slip, speaking in Munich and reminding our so-called Western allies that we have this thing called free speech? You know where else you'd have to go and speak to remind them that they have a thing called free speech where you can challenge the government? Can you guess where else you'd have to give that speech?
Moscow.
Moscow. You have to give it there too. What's the difference? There isn't one. I mean, I think it was the battle for the Marne, I believe, was the most deadly single battle of World War I or up there. Does anybody know what that was fought over, really? It was really fought over which group of elites were going to have hegemony in Europe. That's it. Same value system, same family. They're all intermarried. They're all related. They're all going to the same churches. They're all the same people. Nothing's different. They're just playing Risk. Just playing a game board. It's fought for nothing. Total waste. That's what this is. I mean, who do you vote for if your options are the World Economic Forum and Vladimir Putin? I don't know. I probably don't. I'm a Christian. I don't have a stake in that fight. I mean, I guess I could sit there, Aaron, and negotiate with one of those sides for my vote to get the best deal, but after I throw them my support, how confident are you they keep up their end of the bargain there post-election?
Pretty low.
Pretty low. In a fallen world, sometimes you are going to have moments where, if you're a believer, yeah, that's just not our thing, man. Hey, you guys, Jesus said it was the end of the age. He ascended. We're in the church age now. You guys want to fight? Hadrian to the last man? Cool, but we're out. That's happened many times throughout history for the church. Not our fight. Now, the problem we have in this era is the church wants to say that to literally every fight it's actually supposed to have. Okay? But this is not our fight. There's nothing at stake here. I am confident that if Vladimir Putin could treat me the way that my own government has treated me the last few years to gain an ounce of power, he would do it. I'm also very confident that if our own Western so-called sacred democracies, if they could treat us the way Putin did to gain power, they would. And they currently are. This whole thing, like they're going to go to war with Russia. You have Trudeau standing up there today with his voice cracking because, puberty's a son of a gun. They've got 63 planes, Aaron. Canada's Air Force has 63 fighter jets. These countries just get wiped out by Putin. Absolutely wiped out. Absolutely wiped out. They have no shot. This is a joke. But he who has not learned from history is doomed to repeat it. This is just a fight of elites who are way more similar than they're different. It's a Habsburg dynasty urination match. Not our fight. This isn't the rise of the Soviet Union. It's not any of those things. Although, hey, you want to turn Vladimir Putin into another Soviet Union. I can tell you one way we did, Aaron. Why don't we take a bunch of undermanned, completely overmatched European militaries and throw those at Vladimir Putin? Now you've got yourself maybe another Soviet Union if you did something stupid like that. This has never been our fight. The fact that all the wrong people and all the wrong influences and all the wrong impulses in the culture immediately glommed onto this as a cause celeb should have given everybody who is either not drunk on 80s nostalgia, and I love my 80s nostalgia as much as anybody, but it ain't 1985. So the only two kinds of people falling for this canard are either convinced it's forever 85 and just their brains are broken every time the name Russia's mentioned, or total simps for the spirit of the age. And that's 98% of those who have fallen for this, which is why they went through a procession on their social media feeds. First, they told you to stay home and save lives. Then they told you you hate your grandmother. Then they posted the photos of themselves wearing masks, even outside. Then they showed you their vax cards. Then they showed you their pronouns. And now they have the Blockbuster Video logo up on their social media sites, but you know it as the Ukraine flag. It's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. This is not a transcendent cause. It's a factional one. You and I's interests are not at stake here at all. Their interests are. I agree with that. If Todd were here, as he likes to say, whatever's going on within that reverse Wakanda known as Ukraine, I have little doubt that Davos and Brussels, that their interests are heavily at stake. I have little doubt about that. That's not you and I's problem. We saw over the weekend the city that gave birth to the Sons of Liberty, the mustard seed of the American Revolution, had its city government go out and apologize to a would-be mass murderer on television. We got enough of our own problems, man. What Putin is advocating, by the way, as an ideology, well, Steve, that's what we would have said in the 30s with Germany. What Putin is advocating as an ideology, Aaron, tell me how it's any different than what the Prime Minister of the UK is advocating. Can you tell me fundamentally?
Not really.
Fundamentally, why is it any different? Fundamentally, maybe the depths he can go to because, they have checks and balance still on their power that he does not have. But fundamentally, what's any different from Justin Trudeau and the way he's behaved the last few years and Vladimir Putin? Do you know?
No.
What's any different than Joe Biden? Let me see, throw my political opposition in prison, try to target my political opposition for assassination and persecution, force people to use their bodies against their will. Those all seem like pretty Putin attributes to you, don't they? Mm-hmm. They also explain the last 4 years we all just lived under, correct? Fundamentally, you can't tell me one iota of difference. Fundamentally. Now, the extent may be that by which each side is willing to go or can because of their existing government systems, there's a difference there. But fundamentally, the worldview of Justin Trudeau and Vladimir Putin is the same. And Mr. Starmer, or whatever the hell that hack communist name in UK, they just got elected in UK, fundamentally the same. Fundamentally the same. Not our fight. Just like the French and Germans were fundamentally the same in World War I. Just a group of elites trying to dominate another group of elites, and they're happy to kill a bunch of the so-called little people in the process of accomplishing that goal. There's no higher moral construct here. There's no great cause here, and there never was. This entire thing was a scam, which is why it was largely peddled and perpetuated by all the elements in the culture that have been scamming us now for years. Not our fight. And it never was. I mean, we don't owe this world a thing. As a country, we don't. If it weren't for the United States of America, this planet would have been plunged into darkness by the Iron Curtain, or Man in the High Castle would have been nonfiction. If anything, this planet ought to line up in gratitude and pay us tribute. We owe them nothing. We've given them everything. It's time now for this physician here called the United States to heal thyself. We've got our own problems. And your urination match is not one of them. So our friends at Jace Medical, they came on board our show a few years ago, originally because they saw how public health failed us collectively during the moment when frankly, we needed it the most. And they wanted to make sure, just in case, you had backups of, who knows? I mean, if they're willing to take a drug like ivermectin that they just had given a Nobel Prize to and then just completely and totally deconstruct it and smear it right at the moment that you may have potentially needed it the most, these people were literally capable of anything. So originally, the plan with the Jace case was, hey, let's take the 5 most known venerable antibiotics out there and give people as many options as possible to have backups of those just in case. And then they were able to expand the Jace case to an ever-increasing menu of customizable medications for you as well, including the aforementioned ivermectin, right? So now is your time to, if you've not tried Jace before, they're doing a giveaway for a free Jace case right now, in fact. And if you want to try to win a free Jace case, just go to jace.com. That's J-A-S-E, jace.com/Deace, my last name. Jace.com/Deace is where you can go to try to win a free Jace case, or to finally get yours. If you use my last name, Deace, at checkout, they'll give you a discount on your order. That's promo code Deace at jace.com/Deace, J-A-S-E, jace.com/Deace. Well, it is good to see you again, brother. The return of our good friend Bob Vander Plaats, who's back from your winter hibernation. Man, how you looking? How you feeling? You good?
I'm feeling great. A little bit unkept with the hair a little bit longer than it should be.
I've noticed that. You got the hair parted down the middle, a little feathery look. I mean, it's a little bit like if John Cusack, had grown up as a respectable adult, and not done all of those things to his body he probably shouldn't have. He might have looked like about this at about your age right now, in fact.
Kind of like a beach bum. Some people say midlife crisis. I do have to tell you, talking about beach, though. I was on the beach, Marco Island, Gulf of America, and one of your fans, he greeted me coming out.
You found one.
He greeted me
coming out. The pearl of great price, indeed.
He greeted me coming out of the water. He told me he's from Michigan. He said, "Are you Bob Vander Plaats?" And I'm in a swimsuit, and my hair's all wet with the Gulf of America water. And I said, "Yes." He goes, "I recognized you by your voice." And then, of course, he goes right into how much he loves you, how much he loves the Steve Deace Show.
Let's not bury the lead.
Thrilled with the Monday segment. And then Darla and I went to Naples, to the Ritz-Carlton, and had lunch there, a great place to eat lunch there, overlooking the Gulf. And we ran into your guy again, Kelly, who's a bellman there, and he said, "We just love it." And he said, the Ritz-Carlton staff loves your show and what you do. So you're making a difference out there.
Oh, well, very nice.
It's always my pleasure to go to Florida in February to come back and report you're making a difference.
Did you do your perennial, I ran into John Boehner in between lung darts down there at Marco Island? That happened again?
I did see John Boehner a couple of times on the beach. I did not interrupt him by saying hi or stopping him, those types of.
Didn't ask him for a light?
I did see one time there was a little bit of a smoke trail following him, but
sure there wasn't sulfur. Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
So anyhow, yeah, we do. But I got a chance to see a lot of people in Florida. A lot of them are friends of yours, of mine, and of the movement. So as Donald Trump would remind me, the people in Southwest Florida, those are our people.
So,
and I got a chance to, just real quick, to see Governor DeSantis while I was down there too, doing exceptionally well, and he wanted me to give you his greetings.
No, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. What do you do around here?
What do I do around
here?
where?
I'm just kind of curious because, you've been gone for, the last month, and, all your team did while you weren't here is help win one of our best legislative battles of, the last 20 years in the state of Iowa. So just, there's this trend going around. What 5 things did you do last week? What did you do? When you're up here slaving in an Iowa winter, your team is up here down at that legislature, literally playing Dodge Demons, all right, throughout the halls and corridors of the legislature, and you're on the white beaches of Marco. What 5 things did you do last week?
I got to tell you, Steve, it's a great life. But what it is, one is the team knows when to use me and when not to use me, and part of them knowing, hey, you don't need to be at the Capitol right now. Let us take advantage of this. But really the job around here is to cast a vision, raise the resources, and assemble yourself with the best team possible. And you got to see part of our team last week with Chuck Hurley, our Vice President of Elections and Policy, and Josiah Olson, who spearheads our elections effort. two of the best. And as a matter of fact, Chuck's in studio today just watching this along with his peer Ryan Ben and Danny Carroll and Mr. Doty back here. So Brett Doty. And they're all part of this historic seismic victory that everybody had a part in, including the Steve Deace Show last week.
So let's talk about that victory. And it's been fascinating this entire time. Our state has kind of been, the front lines for this battle. Going back to because the gender stuff comes out of all the marriage battles.
Oh, it does.
And go back to all those shows I did back in that era on the marriage battle, and I kept saying every time we brought activists over from the other side, and would listen to their pitch, I'm like, what you guys are really saying is there's no such thing as gender. Like, do you remember when Phil Robertson, our colleague here at the Blaze, remember when he and Duck Dynasty was the #1 show in America? And in an interview, I think it was it GQ? I think it was who he gave that interview to. And he said, well, he was asked about gay marriage. Like, I don't know, it's the birds and the bees, man. Dudes like chicks and chicks like dudes. I mean, it kind of seems like that's how we've done
Pretty
this.
common sense.
Pretty common sense, right? And because ultimately, you have to argue for the eradication of gender. If on behalf of you do ultimately have to. You have to say that it is not a natural state of being for men and women to be attracted to one another, and so therefore, if that's not a natural state of being, what's the point in having men or women then at all?
Exactly.
What's the point if it's just a unisex human process and not a uniquely sexual one based on the battle of the sexes or the attraction of the sexes? If that's not the case, then why do we need to have male and female as constructs whatsoever? Yeah. And now so after our state had the battle on marriage, right as that was going on, we're going to put this no gender stuff or whatever gender you want to be in the state code. Our state is the very first one now that has completely stripped that out of its state code, hopefully setting a precedent for the rest of the country at the exact same time.
Steve, we just talked about in our team meeting, elections have consequences. And so when Iowa was a blue state, people forget about that. In 2007, we were complete Democrat controlled. I mean, we had a Democrat governor, Democrat legislature, House and Senate leaders, and they pushed all of this stuff. Matter of fact, it's like Trump doing what he's doing right now the first month. That's what the Democrats did in 2007. They pushed all the LGBTQ nonsense whatsoever. And when we were having the conversations on your show on WHO radio about the marriage issue, remember saying the unraveling effect? Mm-hmm. Pretty soon we'll be questioning, are you a male? Are you a female? Who's a boy? Who's a girl?
And they would really bristle. We'd say stuff like that. That's never where this is going to go. That's always where it was going to go.
And your counterpart there, your peer there, was Jan Michelson. He did the morning show. And I remember Jan Michelson, when all this other garbage was taking place, he brought me back on the morning show and said, I'm going to give you an opportunity to spike the football in the end zone. Because all the stuff you were saying about when you unravel the institution of marriage is now coming true here in the state of Iowa as well. Mm-hmm. But now, because of this whole common sense revolution, let's don't forget Donald Trump and all this. He did the executive order saying there'll be two genders, male and female. And we're not going to allow this nonsense to go forward. Well, courage begets courage. Yeah, so he kind of.
I saw he even put out a post the day before the vote.
And what's key,
just as we were getting concerned that maybe enough people were going to go squishy on this, and I saw the president put out a message right before we had the day before we had the vote saying, hey, Iowa's legislature should absolutely get rid of that crap. Yeah.
And so it tells you he's serious about this issue. Mm-hmm. But it also tell the Iowa legislature he's watching what are you doing? How are you leading? Mm-hmm. But when I take a look at this, and we talked about this at team meeting again, team. I mean, yes, it was Donald Trump. Yes, it was Kim Reynolds. Yes, it was Representative Steve Holt. But it was the Steve Deace Show. It was the Heritage Foundation. It was the Iowa Standard, Jacob Hall, who was doing some stuff on this. It was our team here of Danny and Brett and Chuck and Ryan and Josiah doing their deal, our Church Ambassador Network. It was a whole team effort to get the victory that we got last week. And that is key in the country because we're the first state to remove it. But I've got to believe there's going to be a lot of other states now who want to follow suit.
I mean, you put enough teams together, and sooner or later you have a movement, right?
Exactly.
And that's kind of something we have lacked. There's been this thing called the conservative movement. I mean, I've said on my show for years, there's no such thing as the conservative movement. There's an industry that holds a few conferences a year, but by and large, it doesn't coordinate on multiple levels in order to actually enact the very policies that are in all the books that it sells and all the wares that it peddles and everything else. Well, in this case, we actually saw multiple. We saw from, as you mentioned, Jacob Hall as a local Iowa blogger covering this stuff all the way up to the president of the United States, and several points in between. You saw enough teams come together and you form a movement, and then you end up because what they have over there is a movement. I mean, if you were now its numbers they pale in comparison to ours.
Sure.
It's just we don't have the level of conviction they do, and we often don't behave as a movement. Okay, but ultimately, if you were curious, by the way, who exactly Ann Seltzer polled right before the election, it was the people that were down at the legislature for the last 2 weeks. Apparently, the only people she called.
Right, yelling, screaming.
Yelling, screaming, with like scenes out of the New Testament, demonic seething, and everything else. All right. Well, ultimately, if you don't have a movement, your elected officials, unless you got real lucky and you have like a fleet of them with a lot of personal conviction, you don't, and you never have. That's never existed in human history, by the way. All right, so minus that, where they just have their own personal level of conviction and there's a critical mass of them that they'll just withstand all that on their own. That's typically not how this rolls since Genesis 3. So most of the time you need to have a counter movement to the other movement. You need to have a counter movement that both encourages and equips and holds feet to the fire that is at least as loud, if not louder, than the seething that the people we represent are going to face. Even in a state like Iowa, we're not used to seeing stuff like this. Even in a state like Iowa, if there is no counter movement, asking people to withstand that level of pushback that's just not how human nature works.
And movements, you and I know too, Steve, we talked about this not that long ago, but movements need leaders as well. And so with Trump being a leader, Governor Reynolds being a leader, Governor DeSantis being a leader, all of a sudden you're seeing a rise for this movement to take place. And we're finally getting a return to normalcy, a return to common sense, which, as we've talked about not that many weeks before I left for Florida, is based on God's word. That's where our common sense revolution comes from. And Steve, to go back to Florida, I had the opportunity to speak to the Southwest Florida Republican women and give them a shout out. Great crowd at a luncheon. But after I gave my address, they had me for a Q&A. And I told them for the first...
And you told them, listen, I got to be honest with you. In person, Steve Deace is way better looking than he is on camera. Because I know you got questions about that, right?
Yeah, all the time. I said, how good looking is Steve Deace? But I said, in the first time in a long time, I really believe we have a chance to restore marriage between one man and one woman in my lifetime. So I think you're starting to see people, their eyes getting wide open now, like, here was the unraveling that we were just talking about. You dismantle marriage, pretty soon you don't know what restroom to use. Boys get to play in girls' sports, all the other nonsense that gets to go on. So hopefully we see a return to that common sense as well.
Around the country right now, there are people listening that are like, that's great that you guys have this stuff in Iowa. I'm in a traditional red state. We can't get them to do jack squat. Okay. Or I feel like I'm in a blue state, but much of the state is red, but we have these urban areas that just drown everybody out. And because I get these kinds of notes all the time, so let me throw one of them at you. What would you say to encourage those people in our audience right now? How? Because we are the state that sent Tom Harkin's mailbox to Washington for 30 years.
You bet.
Okay, so it's not like this is a long-standing red state by any stretch of the imagination, right? So what advice would you give to activists around the country of what they could emulate that we've been able to do here so far? And hey, it's not like we are all very contented with our national representation in Congress. So it's not like we have a perfect score right now, but we have moved this state demonstrably to the right in the last decade or so. So what advice would you give to people around the country?
Well, some practical advice, number one, is don't ever give up. We talked about that. We went through desert seasons in the Iowa legislature where nothing moved our way. So don't give up. Keep being that voice. Remember, the power's in we, the people, but then engage the bride of Christ. That the ones that are still true to God's word and believe that Jesus is the way. Engage the bride of Christ like never before. And I tell you what, prayer moves mountains, prayer moves legislatures as well. And we've seen it in Iowa. From what we talked about, where you're doing the WHO radio program to where we're at today, that's night and day. That's prayer moving mountains. So I'd say don't give up. Emulate states that you want to be like. And maybe that's Iowa right now. But emulate what has worked here and see how can that work in your blue state or in your red state.
Real quick, we talked, or I did, for about 15, 20 minutes about what went on at the White House with Zelensky and Trump. and J.D. Vance, and that's continued to have reverberations all weekend long. You have any thoughts on that?
Well, I do. I think what it is that Trump resetting, who's the leader here? I loved it when he said, listen, you have no cards. You have no cards on your own, and you're playing a losing hand, and you're flirting with World War III. But with us, you have cards. And I loved how JD put it in there, too. It's like, don't come to the Oval Office and lecture us. You should come to the Oval Office and thank us for helping you out at this point. And I think it was masterful. This is Trump being Trump. To have this, all the press covering this and have it on TV, even where Trump says, this is going to make great television. He still knows what's going to make great television.
It's funny because you and I come out of the sports world, right? Yeah. And there is a natural order of things, okay? And everybody understands sometimes you're the water boy, sometimes you're the point guard, sometimes you're the quarterback. Everybody's got a position, right? Yep. Okay? And what's really bothered me, and that sort of masculine meritocracy did our culture well for generations. And we've just completely upended that. And now we are getting bullied by the guys who, we didn't have to bully them into carrying our gym bags. They asked for the honor and privilege of it.
Right.
And now they're the ones bullying us. There's just something deeply wrong about that, right? And kind of what I just saw in the White House on Friday was like we're resetting the natural order of things.
Yep.
You need to shut your hole, jabroni, and know your role, all right? You are allowed to breathe because we breathe first, and you will take not one more breath than we will permit you to have, just so we're all clear here, all right? These things need to be reset, and we've kind of lost that completely in the current effeminate unisex culture that we have.
Without question, reset, go back to foundation, go back to the fundamentals, and that leads me into the last thing I wanted to talk about, Steve. And this has nothing to do with Gene Hackman as a person or Gene Hackman's death, but one of the greatest movies of all time, the movie Hoosiers. Because where he insisted on team, no one's bigger than the other one, but the fundamentals, the foundation, he reset a team to win a state championship. I just love that movie. We played a clip for that in the team meeting as well. But I think what you're starting to see is this common sense come back, this return to normalcy come back. Red, white, and blue Americans standing up, giving voice. Praise God we get to live in such a time as this.
Amen. That's very well said, brother. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Aaron, do we have some good questions lined up for next hour?
I believe we do, yeah.
All right, so no Todd, so I let my oldest daughter pick the questions. It's always interesting to see what a millennial female will pick from all the offerings we get compared to a bitter, angry, middle-aged Gen Xer.
I think we have some good questions and a good mix of genre.
All right. We'll get to those questions for an Ask Me Anything coming up next hour.
Thank you.
All right. We are back here with Hour 2. And we are pleased to announce something here in a moment. 2 weeks from today. You'll be very excited to hear more about this here in just a moment on the show.
Thank you for the subtle reminder.
Did you like how I did that?
Yes. That was great.
I got you back. I got you.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Steve at stevedeace.com is how you can email the show here. You can also like us on Facebook, Me, We, and Gab. Follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok here as we're back live in demand here on Hour 2. Make sure you also subscribe to our new YouTube channel as well, at Deace Show on YouTube. That's at Deace Show on YouTube. And then if you love the podcast version, please declare your love for us. Leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of preference. You can also hit subscribe or on iTunes follow, assuring that every time we do a new episode, it will show up in your feed every single time. And thank you to all of you that have done those things for us, as well as thank you to our friends over at Birch Gold. You know, you have to go out there and buy a life jacket when the boat is already sinking, right? And you don't buy gold when the economy is already collapsed. You do it because you're like, something smells rotten in the state of Denmark. That's why people of prosperity and means have been using gold as a hedge of protection against government debasement schemes for centuries. And Birch Gold in particular specializes in helping you convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA tax sheltered in physical gold for no money out of pocket. No money out of pocket whatsoever. Get your free info kit on gold right now by texting the word Steve to the number 989-898. That's text Steve to 989-898. No obligation here, folks. Just useful information. And with an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and countless 5-star reviews, you can trust our friends over at Birch Gold. Text Steve to 989-898 to get started. Let the experts at Birch Gold help you secure your future today with gold. That's text Steve to 989-898. Well, it has been, Aaron, 8 years since we originally did this. And it is time to bring it back 2 weeks from today. In fact, from this very moment, 2 weeks from this very moment, it will be the return of Marxist Madness.
Help our veterans not every damn day.
The first trans woman to have a successful uterus transplant.
Man enough to cook my steak rare.
That I felt God's presence with me as I made the decision to end 2 pregnancies.
No regard for human life!
I look like someone who has a mental disorder.
The garbage I see floating out there is just supporters.
Well, the big thing I learned doing this book is that the deep state is packed with patriots.
The impossible has happened!
Where HIV is now, like, if you are undetectable, like, you don't necessarily, like, have to disclose that.
Oh my gracious, Tim! How about that?
So 2 weeks from today, otherwise known as St. Patrick's Day, it'll be, you guys know it's Selection Sunday. The day before, it's Selection Monday here. Aaron is putting the bracket together. He's a one-man Marxist Madness selection committee. He will unveil the bracket live to myself, Todd Erzin. Our very own Jill Savage is going to join us for that as well, former sportscaster like yours truly. Maybe you guys can help me. I'm trying to get Whitlock to join us for this. And he told me it's a great idea, so you guys can maybe just continue to spam him for me. Tell him he's got to show up here Monday the 17th and help us anchor this thing. We're going to lay the bracket out, Aaron.
Yes.
We're going to then let the audience walk through 64 Marxists, but there can only be one king communist. And that'll be selected by, of course, the people.
32, actually.
Oh, 32.
32, plus the first 4 out. And yeah, I don't have that kind of time. It was, I mean, we could have done 64, but I just don't have that type of time. But
could have done 64,000.
Yes. Yeah. I limited it to just the last year. And I had to go through hundreds of clips, whittle them down to 30, 50 or so that were made, or no, it was more like 100 that were candidates, and then finally got it down to the final 36. So I've got all of the candidates. They're all seated 1 through 36. And I just have to make I'm going to start today. Just got to create the graphics for the brackets, and there's no going back. So we are ready to go. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to unveil this. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We need to discuss after the show today some nuts and bolts details about how or where people will vote. But you are going to be able to be involved with this. In fact, you're going to be the main involvement with this, you and the audience, voting for the worst of the worst Marxist meltdowns coming your way here in 2 weeks.
Cannot wait. I just can't wait. I'm so pumped for this. When you asked me like a month ago, hey, should we bring this back? I'm like, no. Yes, we should. All right, so Aaron is going to unveil the bracket. We'll be analyzing it in real time right here in the second hour on the show. 2 weeks from today, St. Patrick's Day, Monday, March 17th, the return of Marxist Madness. And we now return to Ask Me Anything, questions from those of you that follow us on Facebook. And my daughter this week picked the question since Todd is gone for a long weekend. Always interesting to see what kind of questions a millennial mom who's got all kinds of hopium, she's a new mom and everything's great, and still kind of in the newlywed phase of a marriage, right? As opposed to the grizzled, cynical vinegar is a luxury questions that Todd Erzin goes for. So Aaron, I've not seen these questions at all. You've got them, brother. Let's roll.
All right, we'll begin with Jimmy Moon. Steve, I appreciate your emphasis on biblical roles for men and women. My situation, which you know, is that my daughter had a brain bleed and now has a cerebral palsy. I had to stop working to be her full-time caregiver and physical therapist, while my wife works full-time because she was making more money at the time. I'm still the spiritual leader of our home, but right now, she's providing the income. Do you think this aligns with biblical manhood, or would you say I'm outside that role?
Well, I think the number one notion of biblical manhood is servant leadership. So, I mean, and that Jimmy is his name?
Yeah.
Jimmy, I mean, you've taken on an incredible task, and one that on many days is good at probably does, sadly. I'm sorry for your daughter. I can't even envision, as much as I love my two girls, where you are and your family are at, but one that probably on many days comes across as kind of thankless. So, I think what you're doing is pretty masculine, in my view. It's not the norm. I mean, and it should not be the norm. You're in a very terrific circumstance right now where you have, a child with immediate needs that she cannot fulfill on her own. And in an uncertain economy where you need the most amount of income you could possibly generate. So I think what you're doing, I mean, what are the traits and instincts of masculinity? To protect, to defend, to provide, to initiate. You're doing that. You're clicking, you're checking all of those boxes right now. You're protecting your family, you're defending your family, you're providing for your family with the kinds of basic needs that are not typical of a child and are only present in this case because of atypical circumstances. All right. And you initiated and your willingness to, because this is not a natural role for you as a man. And your natural role is to go out into that workforce and get some kind of significance and affirmation that probably is difficult to receive on a daily basis with a daughter battling the malady and the ailment that she sadly was afflicted with. So, I mean, I think you're a badass, dude. But I also think it's these kinds of circumstances that are this level of extraordinary that would cause a man to stay home and the wife to go off to work. Aaron, what are the odds you think that that's what's happening with most millennial men that are staying at home? That's because
it's not
something like this.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not this. Yeah. So, I mean, here's the thing. If you're in an extraordinary circumstance like this and your conscience is pricked enough that you think you even need to ask, it probably indicates that you're in the right. See what I'm saying?
Yep.
Because the guy that's just like, well, I'll drive the kids to school and go get a workout in, which I'll probably not actually do, and, play video games. And that guy's not asking himself that question. He's not even tuned into this show. All right, that jabroni's not even tuned in. Needs to be, but he's not. So, prayers for your family. I mean, I know we have a lot of prayer warriors in the audience, man. If you guys want to come to the table for the Moon family, they could certainly use it. It's an extraordinarily difficult scenario. And to me, you're emulating servant leadership. So I've got nothing but helmet stickers for you, brother.
Next, we go to Jeremy LaForce. Is there another surprise cameo by anyone in the second Nefarious movie?
As of now, no. Well, we're hoping it's going to be a series, actually, and not just a movie. The biggest challenge we have with this is, coming up with, this was not an easy pitch to the Christian pop culture donor class. Hey, we want to make an actual horror film that will scare the hell out of people, be worth a PG-13, has no cheesy conversion scene, and is frankly more inspired by Seven and Silence of the Lambs and Primordial and Primal Fear than it is what we typically produce for Christian films. So when we were trying to raise the money for our movie 5 years ago, that was not an easy pitch. Okay. And that's why my company ended up just funding it ourselves. In this round, we've actually got people of means now that we have a proof of concept. And in the 5 years since we were first trying to raise money for the first Nefarious, I think you've seen, and we've talked about this on the show, Aaron, Christian original content making has matured quite a bit. And so we've got actually people that had wanted no part of what we were doing before or didn't even know we were doing it until the movie showed up in theaters because it just didn't penetrate their bubble. They're coming to us now. I don't think funding's going to be our problem this time. I think if we want to do a series, the biggest challenge we have is what is the proper platform for it? What's the proper platform for it? Because the series will be producing 8 to 12 episodes, high quality. It's going to cost more money than producing one film. And then what's the critical mass? What platform has a critical mass of people that would draw enough eyeballs to reward your investors? I think that's our biggest challenge right now is what's the platform going to be? And it also, but it's the kind of challenge where I think in a couple of years, maybe by the time we're ready to release this thing, the platform will be there. You know, those things are kind of being built out now and being thought of on our side now. They just haven't come to fruition yet. But we have written more roles this time. We've actually written, I'll just say for now, we've written more main roles than just Jordan and Sean, and you guys know them as Nefarious and James. So they've already agreed to come back. Steve, how are you going to bring Sean back given what happened to Edward at the end of Nefarious? We've come up with how we're going to do that. I think it's pretty freaking cool. I think you guys will like it as well. But a series will require another main level character or two. So those wouldn't, be cameos, right? So, but as of now, no, we don't have a bunch of cameos lined up for Nefarious 2, whether it's a series or which form it takes.
All right, next we go to Brent Allen. I recently read that the Star Trek character Khan is being recast. Is there anyone who can match, is it Montalban?
Ricardo Montalban. Yeah, this is being recast. Who's doing it?
That's what Brent said.
So there's this entire library of Star Trek shows on the Paramount. It used to be CBS Plus or All Access or something. I think it's Paramount Plus now. And it was just really clear to me, as much as I love Star Trek, it was just all gay Trek. So I didn't watch any of it, none of it. And then our buddy Tim Young pinged me last year and said, dude, you got to check out season 3, the final season of Picard. They basically...
Yeah, he's being recast as Naveen Andrews. I think that's, what's his face from Lost, the Iraqi dude.
The Iraqi guy.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I think he'd do a great job. Okay. So this has got to be for one of those Paramount Plus series then? Is that what they're doing?
Yeah.
Okay. So season 3 of Picard was incredible. Absolutely incredible. It felt like the ending the Next Generation crew should have gotten in their movies, because as good as First Contact was, I mean, First Contact is arguably the best Star Trek movie. I mean, to me, it's no worse than second best. I think Wrath of Khan is one of the greatest science fiction movies of all time. First Contact is a legitimately great film. It's also really the only even good film that they exclusively did. They did 3 films with the Next Generation crew exclusively. They did Star Trek Generations to kind of, be a bridge. So they had Kirk and Picard in the same film and somehow managed to make a movie with Kirk and Picard and just have it be, okay. Not terrible, not great. But Star Trek First Contact is phenomenal. It's a phenomenal movie. The next 2 films, Insurrection and Nemesis, are not good. Nemesis with a young Tom Hardy as a Romulan commander that's a Picard clone. And those 2 films were so unsuccessful that was kind of the end of making movies with the Next Generation crew. And season 3 of Picard basically is the film to say goodbye to that era of Star Trek that they deserved. But the rest of it just seems like it's just all rainbow jihad crap. It's really lost a lot of its luster. I don't tune into any of it. I'd be very dubious about redoing Khan. Even though, well, I was outright hostile to it till you mentioned Navy and Andrews, because he was great on Lost. He was great. I could see him absolutely nailing the role. I just don't trust the people. Similar to Star Wars, Aaron, I just don't trust the people that are in charge of these franchises anymore. I just don't. And I think what they have done to wreck their legacies. Khan's already been redone, by the way. So you guys remember the J.J. Abrams Star Trek films? Todd's quoting it all the time. He says, "I dare you to do better." So that was meant to reboot Star Trek for a younger audience. The first time many of us knew what a Chris Pine was him as a young James Kirk in, what was that movie, 0809? That's a great movie, by the way. They did a sequel. And the sequel, they didn't tell anybody this until the movie came out. It was kind of under wraps. Who's this villain that Benedict Cumberbatch is playing? He's playing Khan. They went back and remade Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. I'm trying to remember what the name of that movie was. And it was just kind of, I mean, Star Trek II is so great. So flawless. Some things I think you just need to be left alone. And I think Star Trek has really, overall as a franchise, just completely lost its way, as many of these franchises have, because they're just about checking representation boxes now and not so much about telling great stories.
Next, we'll go to Rudy Woods. What's your take on a pastor preaching Sunday service on loving your enemies? And he makes the quote, "Those who vote differently than you are not your enemies. You may think they are, but they are not." What do you think of that quote?
I would need to know the context of this. Because in the right context, this is correct. I mean, the scriptures are very clear. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers of, the of principalities from the spiritual unseen realm. And I can't speak for anybody else. I think that I'm not known for being unaggressive. But Aaron, you can even testify to this when I'm not on the air. The amount of vitriol that I am tempted to spew is way more ratioed towards the people on my own side who betray me than the other side. I think you'd back up, this is even true when we talk privately. I much more struggle not to just undeniably loathe Lindsey Graham than I do Chuck Schumer or Whoopi Goldberg. I mean, I understand what people who have rejected Christ, who have rejected the Creator, who have rejected grace, I understand how they're going to act and perform and behave. I'm not surprised by it. Now, I will do everything that everything short of what the Bible says I can't do, I will do to try to defeat them and encourage others to follow that same process. But I just, the harpies on The View don't get under my skin nearly as much as watching like half of the programming on Fox News. I mean, to me, I just watch the harpies on The View and I'm like, this is just insanity. But therefore, by the grace of God, go I. They're always going to hate me more than I hate them. Always. Where I really struggle and have to and can't control and tame my tongue and my temper is when it comes to people on my own team that not on my team, but wearing my own jersey, who I know would shank me in an instant and already have. So in a certain context, it is accurate that people who vote differently than us are not our enemies. But in the context by which that is probably, like we just talked a few minutes ago about the young dad staying home because his wife can make more money, they need all the income they can get. They've got a daughter with a brain bleed and cerebral palsy, right? And so he has taken on the hard work of caring for her on a daily basis, right? And that, just like you and I talked about, is that the context by which most millennial men stay at home and have their wives go to work, would you say, Aaron? No. It's the exception, correct? Right? What I just mentioned, in the era in which we live, how likely is it that that was the context that that particular pastor was applying that statement to? Probably not very likely. Fair? Mm-hmm. Could be. more than likely, he just, was catching up on what's going on at the gospelcoalition.com in between services. And he's got the third way down, the middle way. There is no middle way between good and evil. There is no middle way. There's not a middle way. There's not. And all the middle way, third way does is just open you up to the other way. Eventually you get so disarmed, so dispassionate, so deconstructed that you're just completely taken over by the other way and give up on the way. That's what the middle way, third way does. There isn't a middle way. There isn't a third way. So there can be a better way of doing things, but that's not what the middle way, better way is. The middle way, better way is, we just stay out. More than likely, given the current state of the pastorate in America, is that Rudy who sent that?
Yes.
Okay. More than likely, Rudy. And I mean, when I say more than likely, it's like way more likely. Okay. I mean, it's probably this likely that you have a pastor teaching the full counsel of God and how to apply God's word in a world that will detest you for it, and is discipling his sheep and your congregation to be prepared and properly catechized to carry out the reality of the Great Commission, which isn't just tell your unbelieving friends about Jesus, it's discipling the nations, teaching them the commands he has given us. Don't do all the stuff the culture says you're supposed to do, because it's all anathema to Christ. It's probably about that much, and if you're listening on the podcast, my fingers are not very far apart, okay? It's probably about that much that you've got a John MacArthur level pastor who's just like, hey, we need a heart check here. Let's remember to love our neighbors, we love ourselves. That'd be great. Probably not the case, though. Fair? More than likely, it's about this much likely. And my arms are, with arms open wide, as Creed once sang, all right? My arms are open way wide. Way more likely in this era of the pastorate. That was said in the context of, here's my excuse for not doing my job and being a gutless coward. Now, hey, we don't shy from friction and confrontation on our show, but I will tell you, I am concerned that now that we could go so far the other way that we do forget we have to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. Your neighbor should not be where God is at. You should be way more concerned about offending God than your neighbor. Now, is that where most of our churches are today in evangelicalism, Aaron? No. But you should be. But does that also mean, Aaron, we should be never concerned about offending our neighbor? Is that what that means?
No.
No, doesn't mean that either. You should be like way less worried about it. But Jesus said that's the second most important commandment, to love your neighbors, you love yourself. So it's got to be a high-ranking concern in there somewhere, and I am kind of concerned. I've railed against the pastor of sweater vest and pleated khakis and nicer than God and Hawaiian shirts in January. I can foresee a scenario now where we're going to be concerned in the not too distant future, Aaron, also similarly about the pastor of a moderately sized church, but maybe has a social media following that way outweighs his congregation. And he is playing more to that social media following and how he talks than he would pastor his church. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little concerned about that. Because here's the reality. If you bear the title pastor, I don't. And there are prophets, evangelists, pastors. They each come with their own instincts and character and attributes and responsibilities. And there are ways that prophets spoke in the Bible that Levite priests did not and kings did not. And vice versa. But ultimately, you need to be concerned if you're a pastor in all your public communication, because you bear the title pastor. You should be concerned, is what I say when I'm about to post here on social media, would I say this in a pulpit? Because you're a pastor. You're not a provocateur. That's not your job. It can be something your job may entail every now and then. But sheep need fed. They need led. And sometimes just sitting there and yelling at them and excoriating them, they don't know what to do. If they knew where to go and knew what to do, they wouldn't need a pastor. So, I could see in the era we're coming into that the opposite problem could be our issue that we confront on our show as a regular. We do still need to love our neighbors. We love ourselves. We do need to remember Jesus died for people. He didn't die for a systematic theology. Did I say systematic theology was not important? Is that what I just said?
No.
No. But what I said was, Jesus did not say on the cross, Father, inculcate them with systematic theology. He said, forgive them. Them, people, forgive them. They know not what they do. Died for people. So people are very important in the kingdom of God. As far as we know, they're the only thing in the entire universe made in the likeness image of God. It's the universe's creator. So they're pretty important. Don't belong anywhere on the same line as God. But they belong on the next line. However far down that line is, they belong on the next line. And so, yeah, ultimately, in a meta sense, the people who vote differently than us are not our enemies. But in the sense of the current climate of our culture and the state of our pastorate, chances are, like the odds that your pastor was putting that in its right context would be on a board plus 2,000.
Yes.
The odds that he was just doing this to cover his nakedness for being a gutless coward, not on the board. They're not taking bets on that, right? Because that's just the overwhelming majority of it. Now, again, there's always exceptions. You're going to know your congregation, your church, Rudy, better than we are. Okay? But, in the macro, in the age in which we live, that language is used way more often as a fig leaf for your gutless pastor to cover his shameful nakedness of being an absolute abject coward and not fulfilling his calling. Way more likely than the other, where he's like, hey, even people who know what time it is need a checkup. Can't forget, we got to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. Good question. Hopefully you have some good ones still to come. Stay tuned. Back here on the Steve Deace Show, powered by our friends over at Real Estate Agents I Trust in these unprecedented times.
Ding.
Thank you, Aaron. I love the monotone ding there. Make sure, as we are attempting to start this thing called the real estate market all over again, we've not had one of those in like 5 years in America between COVID and Let's Go Brandon. So we're trying to kick that into high gear. Once again, that means you need, once again, an agent that you can trust. We'll hook you up with one of those on the website that says it all. The name says it all anyway. realestateagentsitrust.com. There you go and give your information. We'll get you connected to an agent from wherever in the country you're coming to or from that has the track record of success that you're looking for, which we have verified. Otherwise, we wouldn't connect the two of you. A lot of times they're going to come from right here in the Blaze audience, so you have values in common as well. So whether it's across town, across the state, across the country, ultimately where you need to get is across the finish line of what can be, even in the best of times, a stressful process. So get an agent you can trust to get you there. realestateagentsitrust.com is where you can go. Again, that's realestateagentsitrust.com. Hey, quick update on the con thing. So I just got an email from Scott who says this Star Trek Con is actually going to be a radio show produced and written by Nicholas Meyer, filling in the timeline between Space Seed and Wrath of Khan. If that's the case, I am in 100%.
That's really cool.
That is really cool. So Nicholas Meyer is the guy who basically saved Star Trek. Him and Harv Bennett basically saved Star Trek. It was about dead after the failure of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, where frankly Gene Roddenberry was just given too much control to Eric Von Donigan, the Star Trek franchise. Basically, Gene Roddenberry wanted to have his franchise become and do for the culture what the History Channel is currently doing. Just make the whole damn thing about ancient aliens and progressive views and non-Christian origins of human life. And that's all tied deeply into the Star Trek, the motion picture. It failed at the box office. They needed a complete reinvent. And a producer named Harv Bennett, a TV producer who had no background with Star Trek. Paramount actually went to two guys who had no background with Star Trek at all, okay, and said, save Gene Roddenberry from himself. And they hired a TV producer named Harv Bennett and a young writer who had done a little directing but had done much more writing, and a University of Iowa graduate, by the way, Aaron, by the name of Nicholas Meyer. They hired them just to come in, reinvent Star Trek. They changed it around. They went to the more militaristic red Starfleet uniforms. They thought, hey, you guys got to get with the program. We got, America's back. It's morning in America again, and that's what people want to see. And you need a good villain. None of these higher consciousness BS. Okay, people want to get entertained, not join a religion. All right, they got one of those, and like today's UFO movement, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, and what came out was Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, and Space Seed was the episode that Khan, played by Ricardo Montalban in the original television series, made his debut. And so this is going to tell the story, apparently, according to Scott, of what happened between that episode and when they are discovered. Is it Ceti Alpha 5 or 6? I can't remember which one they're discovered on by Chekhov at the beginning of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. That's a great idea. I'd absolutely listen to that. So thank you for clarifying that, Scott. I was not aware. All right, Aaron, some more Ask Me Anything.
Jill Lowe asks, is Michelle Obama really a man? Can I share this meme?
Of course.
Okay. Tim Young, our friend, comedian, shared this the other day.
Oh, yes, I saw this.
For those of you who are listening, I'm sorry, it just doesn't do it justice trying to describe this with words. But it's the meme of a husband and wife in the bed together, and the wife is thinking, well, he's thinking about this, and the husband is thinking about sports or something like that. It's of Barack and Michelle Obama. Anyway, your thoughts, Steve?
And it says he's probably...
Yeah, they both say the other one is on the Epstein list.
And they both use he as pronouns? Yes. I think it's possible.
All right.
I think it's possible.
Moving on. Christopher James Johnson
Big
says...
Mike!
You are against any more U.S. government aid to Ukraine. So am I. Do you support private donations for the Ukrainian people through organizations like Samaritan's Purse?
I would want to know exactly where that money is going and how it's being spent. But sure, I mean, the Ukrainian people are caught in the middle of this like everybody else. And they've got a leader. Zelensky, his entire plan has been from the beginning to have this go on as long as possible, in the hopes that, and one of two hopes, and one of them, and I want to be maximum fair because I don't like the guy at all, and something about him just didn't smell right to me from the very beginning. Having all these celebrities go over there, like U2 doing concerts, okay, in subways of Kiev and all this other stuff, just didn't sit right with me from the very beginning. But to be as fair as I possibly can, mercy triumphs over judgment, it says in Romans. That's the book we're studying right now. One of his plans, I think, did maybe have a shot of occurring. And so it's clear that Ukraine could never win the war, could never win. And so the goal was to prolong it as long as possible as a war of attrition, or create enough of a stalemate that one of two scenarios would occur. One, I think there was maybe a possibility of. That Russia's other strategic partners see that as China, would essentially come in eventually and just kind of give it the Jonah Hill gift to Russia. Hey, man, that's Jews ain't worth the squeeze. Taking too much heat. Hurting the bottom line. We got all these boycotts and everything else going on. Not good. Okay, so cut that poop out. And I mean, I think I was even analyzing. I thought that was a possible outcome in the early months of this, that I could have foreseen that happening. The problem with that scenario is once it became obvious how weak the Biden administration was, then you were never... Russia was never going to face that internal pressure within its own ecosystem. So then the other plan, once that became apparent, and that's the one they've been working for the last 2 years, is to ultimately just drag this out long enough that the only way to end it is for the U.S. to put boots on the ground and or Ukraine to be admitted into NATO, which puts at least some risk. What risk of percentage? I don't know. But whatever you currently think the risk of World War III is, it would be higher if that one of those two things were to occur. Still not saying it's possible. I mean, Putin could be just BSing too. For example, Putin might be looking at the World Economic Forum and thinking, I don't think you guys got it where it counts. He might look at the nuclear arsenal of the United States of America, though, and have a different thought. You know what I'm saying? Okay, we don't know. But that's a hell of a risk to take, right? That's a hell of a risk to take. And for what? Ukrainian minerals? Sorry, not sorry. I don't think that's worth culling a significant portion of the world population or risking such a thing. I just don't. So that's been the goal. Just prolong, and eventually you drag either the United States into it or yourself into NATO as a way of bringing it to an end. That has been the plan. There clearly is not an amount of the Ukrainian people that Zelensky is not willing to kill in order to execute that plan. That's been the plan for the last couple of years. And that would have been the plan if not for the last election. This would have all just continued moving on and on and on. But the American people said, we got a different plan. And so now plans change. So what I would want to know, because, altruistically, a lot of Ukrainian people are getting something from Vladimir Putin they didn't ask for, they don't deserve. I just want to know, how are we sure that the assistance is going to them? How are we sure about this? And if you can, if you feel like it's reasonably assured, I have no problem with helping the Ukrainian people via private charity. I just would want to know that that's exactly what's going on. That's all.
Do you have a quick take? So the Atlanta Fed they're now cast for GDP. Quarter one in 2025 is now at minus 2.8%.
So it's going to shrink.
Yes.
What happened in the fourth quarter? Because it was 2 consecutive quarters is considered a recession. Do you know? Off the top of your head?
Yeah, it's 2 or 3.
2 or 3? Well, my quick take is, and I've been warning about this.
Yes.
That they would either just let go of the rope and let everything they've been trying to do to keep this thing seem somewhat propped up post-COVID, just let it all fall in Trump's lap and make that the next crisis that they try to end a Trump presidency with. Or even if it doesn't go to that extent, eventually, Uncle Bingo, it's time to pay the check. And I made the analogy about the early Reagan era. People had way different thoughts about so-called Reaganomics in 83 and 84 than they did in 81 and 82. And it wasn't an instantaneous. It wasn't morning in America again. I know if you're Aaron's age and younger, you kind of been sold this vision that, well, the day Reagan was going to get inaugurated, the Iranians gave up the hostages, and everybody just completely undid, like the Seinfeld episode that you were just saying, or used in your montage today, Aaron. We just forgot that Jimmy Carter was president, and everything was great from the very beginning. That's not actually what happened. It's not. Reagan's popularity was Mendoza line for a couple of years. The midterm elections of 82 were not good for the Republican Party. It took time. I mean, you're ushering in a whole new paradigm with supply side economics, and you're coming out of a paradigm that was a systemic failure. It took a good deal of time for things to turn around. And once it did, you saw the election of 1984. And in this case, Trump is instituting numerous paradigm shifts. And we're coming off of a systemic failure of the previous administration. So, and you know what? This also ties into stuff like Epstein files and JFK files. Because here's the thing. just looking at it politically, guys, it is very possible the last 6 months of this year or like the first 6 months of next year heading into the next midterm, there may not be a lot of organically great economic news. Right? We're digging out of some fallout here. There might be contrived great economic news, and contrivance doesn't always mean dishonest. I mean, Trump announces a new deal with Apple, that kind of stuff, okay? But organic stuff where that stuff has now made its way down into the water table, that people now are feeling like, okay, it's okay to go buy a house again. It's okay to hire people again. It's okay to have discretionary, to engage in discretionary spending again. It may take some time for that to be felt. And so what content, political content, are people going to be consuming that will be indicative of your paradigm shift if it takes a while for the economic changes to be positively felt? Well, one of them would be finally being transparent to people and the truth about some of the saddest stories and sagas in American history. And I just think it's time for Pam Bondi to stop doing Fox News hits, complaining about the deep state. You're the Attorney General, ma'am. Your agency that you oversee, the Department of Justice, is who put Ghislaine Maxwell in prison for life. I mean, I guess we can have people talking. Here's the thing: if you're running next year's midterm elections, Aaron, would you rather have people talking about negative growth first quarter, or talking about a bunch of elites they already can't stand and how many of them went to Epstein Island and probably deserve prison for that?
It would be the latter.
It'd be the latter. That'd be the much better political conversation for our side, would it not? Even if let's admit, some people wearing our uniform are going to get caught up in this. Clear?
Yes.
That's why it hasn't been out there already.
Yep.
Okay? But we can either do that, or we can have a conversation about a sluggish economic rebound. I think it's much better to, hey, we're leading a revolution on multiple fronts. We're draining swamps, all right, and we're giving power back to the people. We're telling truths so that people are still buying into your overall agenda, as opposed to it's just transactional in the moment. What's the gas price? What's interest rates? Just a thought.
Next up, we go to Eric Tague. School choice legislation is making its way through Texas. How is the Iowa program working out?
Well, I think this is the first year now that the means test is off, right?
I believe so.
So it's universal now. So the first couple of years it was means tested to basically politically push back on, you guys are defunding the schools, blah, 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 blah. So now it's universal, regardless of income level. I mean, I don't know. So far, reviews seem pretty great. Not a lot of kvetching about it in our state at all that I can see.
Just to let you know, it was ever present for the first 6 months to a year of this legislation being enacted into law. They're bankrupting the schools. They're this, they're that. This is going to people who don't deserve it. Democrats are not talking about this at all right now.
Nope. It
should tell you everything.
Yep, because it took effect and people loved it. So they have to move on. And Kim smartly counteracted that because she put forth legislation about raising teacher pay at the exact same time, right? Something like that, I think, too. So she took that talking point away from them. They were left with nothing, right? Now, there can be individual school choice programs in your state that make things worse than they already are. You guys know your states better than I do, okay? But to me, I'm for just about anything that loosens the hegemonic grip the demonic teachers unions have on the education system and therefore our kids. The threshold for, just speaking for me, the threshold of what I'm willing to tolerate to save a generation of our kids from those dens of iniquity and that level of soul rape and brainwashing, pretty high. But you guys know your individual states better than I do. But in our state, it's going great. People love it. So far. This is the first school year where the means test is removed, and so we'll see. Maybe ask that question in a couple of years. We'll have a better answer for you, but right now, it's very popular.
One more quick question.
You bet.
Matt Cooper asks, as someone who's written multiple books, what's your advice on how to really get one going and not to peter out as you progress?
Make sure the first one you write is about something you know a lot about and are very interested in, so that it is an extension of how you would communicate in other venues. And then it'll seem less intimidating getting to the end. That's the hardest thing when writing a book, is getting to the end of it the very first time. And then it gets easier with ensuing times. Hey, great questions this week. Great job, Anastasia, picking the questions. Thank you very much, sweetie. We are back at it again tomorrow, noon to 2 Eastern, right after Glenn Beck, right here on Blaze TV. Until then, Romans 8:28.